This episode is brought to you by Modal Electronics, who enable you to play and perform powerful sound with their incredible synthesizers. You can enjoy vibrant wavetable patches with the Argon 8 series, or you can produce with state-of-the-art analog-style synth textures with the Cobalt 8 series. To check out Modal Electronics' incredible array of synthesizers, go to modalelectronics.com. Modal Electronics. Dare to sound different.
Should I be hooked up with a headset and stuff, or
no? I only do it to look more legit, because some people come on and have the most insane systems, and I feel very left out. But honestly, the Zoom audio is always fine.
Okay, cool. Well, you look very professional, so you're doing good.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, well, welcome to the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. And well, I think I should start off by saying I am a massive and was an even bigger fan of the OC. To the point where you know, when the show was airing, I remember even ordering like the OC magazine, I think, and being teased a lot by my schoolmates as a result.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I'm so happy that you watched the show and liked it. That's so cool.
It was one of the best TV shows I think I've ever watched, and I'm sure you get fed up of being asked about it. So I want to start off by asking you about music.
Yes.
What is your earliest musical memory, and you know, what kind of music did you grow up on?
Yeah, actually, I'm wearing my vintage Springsteen tee, so I have to represent a little bit. Growing up, my dad was super into music, but Springsteen, Dylan, Neil Young, The Cure. It was like all over the place, just music of that time and stuff that I wouldn't have known as a kid. So I was really lucky to grow up with it. My personal youth, I was exposed to a lot of 90s hip hop and R&B and that kind of thing. So it was definitely a mixed bag of music, but I'm very grateful to have had the education. And my older brother was really into music. He was like Jane's Addiction and Rage Against the Machine. So I was exposed to a plethora of genres.
When you grew up more on the kind of like classic rock stuff, did you go to any concerts? My
first concert ever was a B-52s concert that my dad took me to. So definitely very of the time, as a kid. And then my first concert for music that I liked was Paula Abdul.
Right. And so how did things change from getting into, being into kind of classic rock stuff like Neil Young, Bruce Springsteen, which is amazing, to starting to listen to hip hop, which is obviously, equally amazing, but that's quite a big change. Do you remember?
It is. Probably either Outkast, Southern Playlistic, or Far Side, Passing Me By. Like, those were definitely huge albums on rotation when I was growing up. I think it was a combination. So my dad was kind of classic rock, all of those, amazing bands and people from that time. And then my brother, because growing up with my brother, not only was it Jane's Addiction and Rage Against the Machine, he definitely introduced me to hip hop too. So all those early 90s amazing hip hop groups and people.
And did you ever consider going into music yourself? Can you sing and did you play instruments growing up?
I mean, I thought I always wanted to be a singer. I can carry a tune, but I'm way too shy, way too embarrassed to ever actually do it for anyone other than my walls.
And so, but that's kind of surprising though, because obviously, given the fact that you've ended up being an actress, very public facing. So, so how did you start getting into acting?
Well, it was high school. I started doing plays and musicals in high school, and I loved it so much. And my dad kind of, he was he was in the business, and he said, "Hey, you're kind of good at this. Do you want to try it?" And I had so much fun doing it that I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. And it kind of just happened, which I'm so fortunate and so grateful, but it was not a plan. I didn't have a plan. I just really loved doing it. I don't like the attention Wow.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that must be yeah, pretty full on. Was like the biggest, was the first role that you got that was huge, the OC?
Yeah, that was my first series that I got was the OC. So it was kind of, it's crazy and a little unheard of. And obviously I was very lucky that Josh Schwartz took me on, but it was it was crazy. I was 21. It's like so young
Wow,
and
yeah.
doing this, but it
Were
was
you
really
younger
cool.
than the other leads? Because I remember we were like me and my friends, we would have been like 13, 14, and
I'm
everybody was
sure.
talking about the OC. We were at boarding school, right, in the
Oh
UK,
my gosh.
and
Yeah.
everybody, there were like 1,000 people at this boarding school. Everybody was watching the OC all the time. It was like, you know, whilst people were meant to be learning like Latin and stuff, they were like, oh my God, do you know what happened, you know, with Summer and Marissa and, you know,
That is
and stuff.
so cool.
But
Wow.
anyway, but were you
Yeah.
the youngest of them? Because everybody was
No,
kind
I
of saying
wasn't.
that the others were like 30.
No, Ben and Adam, who, played Ryan and Seth on the show, were in their 20s. I think Adam's probably a couple years older, maybe Ben's a few, and Mischa was
Hmm.
younger than I. Mischa was only like 16.
Right.
So she was just a teenager, which is insane.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very.
And so how did they put the show together? Because it's such, and was it Josh Schwartz who wrote it?
Yes, Josh Schwartz wrote it, was the creator of the show, and he was young himself. He was only 27, which is
Yeah.
very young for, someone creating a show. And it just came together. I think Mischa maybe was cast. Peter Gallagher was cast first, who played Sandy, Seth's father, I believe. And then Mischa maybe, and then it kind of trickled down from there. But it just all kind of fell into place. And I think that's what happens with shows, it's all about chemistry and people, and I think we just had a good group at the time. And it just worked. Good
Yeah.
writing too, obviously. Like everything else that went into it obviously was amazing.
It
But we were
was,
lucky on that front.
yeah, it was really brilliant writing. Quite unusual for a show of its kind as well, because it wasn't your full on drama. I mean, how would you characterize it for those listeners, you know, who are
Yeah.
Philistines and who may not have checked out the OC? You know, not everybody
Right.
has. How would you
Yeah.
characterize it?
Yeah, it wasn't like your traditional hour-long drama soap, nighttime soap, whatever you want to call it, or teen soap drama. It was more of like a dramedy. There was definitely comedy to it, and it was very eclectic for its genre, with the music being a huge part of the show,
Mm.
which set it apart. We had amazing bands on there. And it just made it really unique. All of the things and the characters and how they were written and how they were performed, especially I feel like, Adam Brody's character, Seth, he was
Yeah.
so good and so funny, and not your usual one other co-leading male of an hour-long series like that.
Yeah, he gave a lot of hope for you know, the kind of the geeks amongst us. And I wanted to talk about the music because the music was
Yes.
huge. So the music supervisor was Alexandra Patsabas, right?
Yes, she's
And
incredible. Yeah.
and she runs now a label called Chop Shop Records. Is that what she's still doing now? But yeah, talk a little bit about the music and how much of a kind of crucial role that played in the show. It was like another character, wasn't it?
So that's actually exactly what I say. It was another character of the show. It was such a huge part of it, and it had such an impact. And Alex Patsavas is incredible, and she would find, like, there's the Imogen Heap song, "Hide and Seek." Like Alex like brought it to Josh Schwartz and was like, "I don't know where this is gonna go. I don't know what we're gonna do with it, but hold on to it. We're gonna have to use it somewhere." And that song, it was set to, I forget what scene right now, but maybe anyway, it was so incredible. And even the Mazzy Star song and the pilot, and it just started off so strong, and then got to introduce some lesser known bands. And I feel like Death Cab for Cutie I think it was Adam Brody's input, and their first song on the show kind of got them some attention, and it was just really cool that it was bringing that stuff to light as well.
Yeah, because at one stage, I think it was in the second season, there was a kind of music venue became one of the
Yeah,
shooting
yeah.
places in the show, and it was called the Bait Shot.
The bait shop.
My nerdy
Yeah, the
knowledge
bait
is
shop.
really still intact after all
I'm
these
so
years.
impressed. I'm so impressed.
And so, but one of the bands that came on the show was like a little known band at that time called the Killers, right? Who came
Right.
and
Yep.
played on the show, and now
Yes, we
they
had a
would
few
headline
bands.
Glastonbury.
Right. Yeah. They came and played the bait shop. There was, yeah, a few that did that.
What were they
And
like?
really cool from what I remember. It was so long ago now, but
Yeah.
I never remember anything but a positive experience with anybody, any musicians that came on.
Yeah, and in terms of you mentioned Adam Brody's input into getting Death Cab for Cutie on. Did you did everybody make suggestions, and did everybody kind of like the music being selected on the show?
Everyone definitely liked the music. Josh Schwartz also is great with music, so it was a really great combination. Alex Pitzavas, who's phenomenal, and then Josh's taste, and then everyone else. And Adam Brody had really good taste, and he introduced me to Death Cab and everyone else. And he was really into Elliott Smith, all these really amazing musicians that I learned about while I was on the show.
Yeah, yeah, it was so
Oh,
eclectic.
Bright Eyes. Sorry, I meant Bright Eyes,
yeah.
not Elliott. Yeah, but Elliott Smith too, of course. But like
I think Elliott Smith was in there. Both of those acts,
yeah,
I remember.
yeah, it's the
Basically,
same
anyone
kind of
good indie was
yeah,
on that show.
right, right.
And some really unknown bands with some songs that are literally unbelievable. So if anybody hasn't checked it out, even just the soundtrack is
Sure.
just unbelievable. So in terms of what it was like actually auditioning for that show, in terms of your own story, like how did it work? Did you just hear about it and go in?
Well, actually, it was kind of funny because I had a best friend auditioning for the role of Marissa, which was Mischa's role. And I read it and I was like, I want to audition for that. I want that role. And for some reason, Patrick Rush, who was the casting director, knew me and brought me in for summer. And she was just a guest star at the time. And I went in and read, and Josh Schwartz said, I made him laugh. Like this one line I had really made him laugh. And I wasn't what they were envisioning for that role or anything, but the fact that I made them laugh got me the part. And since I was a guest star, I didn't have to jump through so many hoops, which was very fortunate. I was so lucky. And I'm happy I made him laugh.
Yeah. And that show did have exactly the right mix of comedy and drama. So, but by the end, right, as with all TV shows, it had to come to an end. And some people would say like the first two seasons were stronger, were the strongest ones. Sure. Is that what you would agree with, or do you think you managed to keep it going all the way through? And were you disappointed that it ended after 4 seasons?
Well, you know what? I think, even Josh will say this himself. He's like, just skip season 3. Like, it's not his, you know what I mean? Like, he kind of says that. So I think the first and second were definitely the strongest. Yeah, ending after 4, for me personally, in my personal life, I had gone to do a film towards the end of that season. And I was going back and forth and everything. So the timing for me, I was like, okay, if this is coming to end, hopefully this is all starting, or other things. Or not that I wasn't grateful. I would have done it forever, but it probably ended a little sooner than anyone expected.
Wanted to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say.
Was there ever a discussion about kind of revisiting it or putting it back together?
People are always like talking, but it's like, well, Mischa's character Marissa died in season 3, and it's kind of like, well, where would you go? I mean, and if there is a place to go, I would always follow. Like, I'd be up for it. It's such a great experience for me. And Josh Schwartz is literally like my brother. We're super close, so I would do anything with him. But yeah, I don't know where you go.
Yeah, I think it probably would be difficult because it's like that classic, the 4 characters, younger characters, are what the show's kind of based. I mean, obviously all the characters and
Yeah.
Peter Gallagher, Sandy and Kirsten, everybody. God, all the
Yeah.
memories. So I wanted to ask, have you stayed in touch? You mentioned that you and Josh are very close. What about Summer and Seth? Seth, Marissa and Ryan. In real life, did you guys get on very well? I mean, sometimes it's not like it is in the movie. So
we did. No, we did. We got along very well. We were lucky. We had fun together. We were friends. It really created a nice environment to work. And yeah, it was great. I mean, after the shows ended, yes, I'm still close with Josh. I think maybe, as you know, Melinda Clark, who played Julie Cooper, and I are starting the OC Rewatch podcast together. So her and I have rekindled over this past year, and she's fantastic, and I love her. And I've ran into people here and there, and it's so nice seeing everybody again, because it's like, your family you haven't seen in 18 years or something, or whatever, 15 years. It's all good feelings.
I mean, in terms of, so I didn't know that about the podcast. I knew that you were starting a podcast called Welcome to the OC Bitches, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's the line that
line.
Luke says in the pilot. Yeah, welcome to the OC bitch. So we did a play on it, and welcome to the OC bitches. And
yeah, damn right. Yeah. It's the best. It's the best line from the show, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
it is the classic. So you're doing it with Melinda Clark, and so the podcast will involve you rewatching and kind of talking about the episodes. Is that right?
Talking about the episodes, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. We're going to have guests on, fellow actors, co-stars, behind the scenes, writers, Alex Pitsavis about music. We're kind of having like a mixed bag of people, and it's fun. It's like going back and rewatching it is pretty crazy, because I haven't seen it maybe ever, some of them, but
really,
it's really fun for me, like as an audience member watching them,
Yeah, that will be awesome. I think there'll be a huge amount of interest in that, because those of us who grew up with the OC, clearly haven't gotten over it. One thing I wanted to ask as well about the OC is do you get annoyed? Sometimes when I get people on, like musicians, say I get like Toto on and I ask them about Africa, or I get Earth, Wind and Fire on and I ask them about September. When you ask anyone, whether it's any creative person, about their greatest hits, I sometimes worry that it's incredibly annoying. So is that the case? Do you get bored of talking about the OC, and do you get asked too much about it?
No, not at all. I recognize that I have everything I have because of it. Like, I'm proud of it. I'm grateful for it. I can talk about it all day long. It was a really positive, great time in my life. And, gratitude's a big deal. So I come from that place.
Yeah, that sounds like a healthy attitude. And also, I doubt the answer would have been, I'm damn tired of it, if you were about to start that podcast.
Right. No, I can never talk about it, but let me do a podcast about it, where all you do is talk about it.
yeah, exactly. But so obviously after the OC finished, you went on to star in all sorts of things. Chuck, which was obviously created by Josh Schwartz. I mean, I know you only appeared in a couple of episodes in that. You had a lead role in Heart of Dixie. You had a recurring role in Nashville. I mean, you've done all sorts of things. What has been the greatest memory since the OC? And would you still have the fondest memory for the OC?
Yeah, the fondest memory for the OC, because I was so young and it was my first thing, so nothing can replace that. Heart of Dixie for me was great. I loved everyone I worked with. I loved playing Zoe Hart. She was so fun. But there's movies, there was a movie called The To-Do List I did that's a comedy with a fantastic director, and with Aubrey Plaza, and that one was super fun for me. That's a good memory. But I'm kind of happy with everything that I did. It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are you working on acting wise at the moment?
At the moment, acting wise, I don't have anything that like I'm doing right now, but there are a few things that we are thinking about.
Yeah. And in terms of another huge part of your career is fashion, working across the the fashion industry, supporting different brands and doing all sorts of things. When did that start? And is that like a major passion? Would you consider that as big a passion as sort of acting?
Well, I do love clothes. I love fashion. I always have ever since I was little. And it's been fun to have the opportunity to design some stuff. I mean, obviously, pretty well like what goes into it and how detailed it is. But I think it's great. And I'm, I just anything I'm passionate about, I'm open to like exploring, doing, and I'm grateful that I've had the opportunities to do any of it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. And so now in terms of music, you started off with classic rock, then went into hip hop. Did your taste change around the OC? Did you find yourself sort of listening to the Killers and Bright Eyes and all of that indie stuff?
I definitely, I listened to a lot of that during the OC because of the OC. And it was also just what was on and around and, but I was so happy to be introduced to most of it. Even, Phantom Planet does our theme song, California. And they're so cool. And that was awesome. The exposure to music was a huge perk of being on that show.
Yeah. And so since then, what do you listen to at the moment?
Well, I have a 6-year-old daughter, so I don't get a lot of me music. There's a lot of, although I've gotten her into Taylor Swift, which I'm happy about because it's not like the nursery, rhyme songs and whatnot. But me personally, I mean, I'm all over the place. There was Rye had a song this past summer called Beautiful that I was really into. But yeah, my taste in music is very eclectic.
Yeah. And how big a part of a role does it play in your life? I mean, obviously, with your daughter, you must be, daughter plus career. I'm imagining, you don't find that much time to just kind of sit down and like go on Spotify for ages.
No, I really don't. But I love music so much and I love expressing myself with music. Like if I'm talking to someone, I want to send them a song, and things like that. And I like finding and discovering music, which if I ever had time to myself, I would literally sit there and just go through and listen and try to find like the coolest thing that I can share with my friends and feel proud that I found it.
And as this podcast is called The Greatest Music of All Time,
yes.
I mean, the answer is always different for people, but who would your greatest artists be if you had to pick?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Obviously Springsteen was a huge part of my world growing up. Joni Mitchell. But like I said, there's music like from The Far Side and 93 Till Infinity from Souls of Mischief. Like it's how do you pick one? Can you pick one? What do you say?
I mean, the Beatles and Elton, those are, I'm pretty vanilla though, I got super obsessed. I got super obsessed with the Beatles, I don't know if you've ever seen their documentary series, but it is very, very good. And so
I'll have to watch it.
Yeah, that is an awesome series. So that kind of, I've listened to like literally every record that they've made, but quite a few bands like that. But I know what you mean, and I wouldn't say they're the greatest in an objective sense. Obviously, no one can be. And I do sometimes get people on the podcast, like I don't know, occasionally like a politician or someone like that, or a writer. And they will expect us to be talking about opera and classical music because of the title of the show. And there's, obviously the greatest music of all time is classical. And you can read music, right? And so, I don't know, get a little bit exposed for my lack of sophistication.
Sam Cooke. Sorry, Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
If
I had to say one, I might say him. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Netflix documentary about Sam Cooke?
I have. Yes, I actually have. Crazy story.
Yeah. It's so bizarre how his death can be such a mystery still to this day.
Still to this day, I know. But anytime if he comes on, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no, he's one of the best singers of all time for sure. So
Yeah.
in terms of, and one of the things that I like to ask people on this podcast about is social media, because
Mhm.
no matter what area of public life you're in, it feels like these days you've got to use social media. What's your relationship with it like? Like, how often do you spend on social media? And did you watch The Social Dilemma?
I didn't. I heard it was great. I have not watched it. Being a mom and a working mom, I don't have as much time. Maybe I try to use social media for only positive and, connecting with people and things like that. It can be very toxic scrolling through and seeing especially this past year, the pandemic, and seeing everyone's like, oh, we're like thriving and my family and blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, if it makes me feel bad in any way, like I take a break from it. But I'm conscious of not spending too much time on it either way. But I know it can be used for good, and I like to try and do that.
Yeah. So you don't find yourself kind of, I mean, being a working mum, you're not, again, it's a bit like Spotify and listening to music. You're not going to find
Right.
yourself like using social media too much. Have you ever found yourself getting, addicted to it and having to
Yeah,
take breaks?
for sure. Like at night, and you're in bed and your kid's asleep, just scrolling through Instagram, and it becomes a habit or an
Yeah.
addiction, however you want to look at it. And I think it's very healthy to take breaks.
And what platforms do you use? Just Instagram, or
Yeah,
do
just
you don't use Twitter?
No, I never did. I joined Instagram pretty late, and then I was like, I don't need to open up this too. This is
Yeah.
bad enough. No, but it can be used for good, and
Yeah.
focus
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of this year with the pandemic, how have you found that? How have you been coping with that? Are you based in California? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was born and raised in LA, and I'm still out here. And this past year, of course, it was very challenging in so many ways. And I have a 6-year-old who started kindergarten, and it was at home on a computer, and she recently just started going to school, which has been fantastic. But I tried to say, okay, this is forcing me to slow down. I get every day with my kid, and I can focus on things that you kind of get distracted and don't have the time to be fully present a lot of the time. Now, it wasn't easy, and there were definitely down days, and it was hard, but trying to focus on that and saying you'll never really have this time again, to put that perspective on it, really helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, did you manage to maintain that kind of attitude throughout?
Well, it
That's
depends on the
very
day.
admirable.
Yeah, it depends on the day. I tried my best, but it was hard. It's
Yeah.
definitely hard.
And what's the
No way around
situation
that.
out there right now? Is LA open?
It's pretty open. I mean, they're vaccinating like crazy out here. I know we've seen a drop in cases. We're certainly not out of the woods by any means, but I think, and knock on wood, I believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
With all the vaccinations happening, and I'm just so grateful.
Yeah, it's been an amazing effort and really impressive of Biden and the new
Oh my
administration
gosh.
to
Thank
uh,
goodness.
to roll it out that quickly is
Yeah.
unbelievable. And
No.
when the pandemic ends, how do you reckon you'll change? Like, will life change
Uh,
that much?
well, you know what? I'm such a homebody as it is. So in that way, it's been really nice. Like, oh no, I can't go anywhere, so I don't have to. So that'll be interesting to be in social settings again. Even going to a restaurant for my first time this past weekend, but sitting outdoors and spaced out, it was kind of like just really surreal and weird. And it's like,
Yeah.
are we all going to be like different people? And is it ever going to be what we used to know as normal? And I don't think we'll know for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think we'll know. I mean, do you think when things reopen, do you think that there's going to be a paranoia for all of us, and maybe quite rightly, that we're doing the right thing at all times and not spreading this?
I think it's definitely going to have a lingering effect for sure. Like even my kid is like, "Mommy, can I touch this? Is it okay?" It's impacted our lives so wholly that how can it not? How can I watch things right now, or I see a video from the past and I'm like at Disneyland on a roller coaster? I'm like, oh my God, how was I holding the handles of that roller coaster? Like that starts to go through your mind because you're thinking, oh, you don't want to touch it. It's like, it's going to take a lot to like deprogram your brain, I think.
Yeah.
A long time.
Yeah. So for example, with music, would you go to a gig this year? Do you reckon, or do you reckon you'd wait till it was completely? What would make you happy enough to go to a gig? Because I know a lot of big music fans who are like, I'm not going to a gig this year.
I don't really see a need for it or a necessity for it. I know that if people are vaccinated by then, you'd probably feel more comfortable, but I don't see that being on the top of my list.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think that events like that and, you know, big ceremonies, you know, like the Oscars, I think is probably going to go virtual or something like virtual. Do you think all of this stuff will change forever? Because it will be a couple of years at least.
I would say a couple of years, but I don't think forever. You know, the world's been through pandemics before, and yeah, it took time, but we recovered. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be okay.
Yeah. And so you see it as that in the future you would potentially go to a gig, but just, you know, you're not like rushing to get back to life as it was. You want to be patient.
Yeah, I have high hopes that things can have a certain sense of normalcy, but yeah, not like I don't need to go to a crowded concert within at least, you know, from here until January.
Yeah. That sounds like you're on the same page as so many people. And it's, absolutely understandable. We'll have to see what happens. So in terms of advice for people who want to become the next Rachel Bilson, want to be big
Not very high
stars.
aspirations.
Well, you know, I'm sure many people will want to repeat your success. So what do you think has served you the best in your career so far? What advice would you give to kind of young actresses?
I will say that it's very challenging to be in this business, and it's very hard not to take things personally, but you have to believe that if it's the right thing and at the right time, it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I mean, you've already said that in so many words that the OC was the best, the thing that comes the closest to that. Do you hope for another moment like the OC where you're like, actually, you know, the OC was kind of old news compared to this. This is way better. Do you envisage a day where that would happen, or do you think it would be impossible?
I think, you know, I'm all into evolving and like maybe in this stage of life, having something as like, you know, impactful and meaningful in my life and in my career, I would say I would for sure be happy if that happened.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it will. But in the meantime, do you know what's the hardest part of being a public figure, like on social media and stuff? Do you find that you get, you know, your privacy invaded at all? I mean, I guess COVID's easier to maintain privacy, but as a result of things like the OC, Heart of Dixie, and pursuing, you know, a career as an actress, have you found it difficult to kind of switch off from that?
You know, well, as far as social media goes, you control, you know, what you put out there, which I like, because sometimes you're out of control of that, you know, with maybe paparazzi or with people, you know, if they want to be taking your picture or whatever. But I've always had the attitude of like, well, what are you going to do? You know, it is what it is. I live my life. I don't adjust things for what could be perceived of me or what people, you know, could judge, or I'm just me, and I try to live my life as if none of that exists.
Yeah.
And having a kid too, you just don't want to pay attention to any of it and any negative stuff like comments on social media and things like that. Like it's just
Yeah.
not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can block it out to a certain extent. So I wanted to finish off by asking about music again. You've already said who are your favorite artists of all time. In terms of how you listen to music now, I just assumed before that it was Spotify. Do you stream all your music, or do you collect vinyl or something like that?
Actually, I do have a record player. I love collecting records. I still don't have Spotify, and I have people every day like, get on Spotify. Like I still just have Apple Music, but I find everything there, and that's what I use primarily on my phone. And that's where I do all of my searching and whatnot. But I think Spotify would be super beneficial and cool. So I think I should probably just cave and get it already.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are pros and cons for sure. And this year, I think you mentioned a track already, but what in your mind, like, is the best thing that you've heard this year? Or, when you're listening to tunes, what's the first thing that you find yourself going back to at the moment?
Oh, that's so hard. Maybe Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell.
Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. I apologize for, jumping back and forth between music and the OC and all manner of other things.
Oh, it was great. I loved it. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I really appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Tingly. Tingly is on a mission to change the culture of gifting by encouraging everyone to give experiences rather than material things. Tingly's passionate team has handpicked the world's best experiences, including travel, adventure, romance, food, wine, and more, and brought them all together in one place. Tingly gives the recipient of the experience freedom of choice. Here's how it works. You purchase a gift box, Tingly sends an e-voucher or delivers a plastic-free gift box, and the recipient chooses from hundreds of experiences in over 100 different countries. There's no expiry date on any of Tingly's gift experiences. Tingly encourages us to give stories, not stuff, to treasure memories above possessions. To find out more, go to tingly.com.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.